Family isn't always bound by blood sometimes. It's forged in fire. When 23-year-old Sarah Cozed and her husband Stuart took in 2 war refugee brothers, they thought they were simply offering shelter. But Deshawn and Elijah carried more than just scars. They carried a secret that would drag Sarah back into the shadows of her military past. For 2 years, their love built a fragile peace. Then came the knock at the door. The accusations. The courtroom battle where a child's photograph shattered everything. Just when safety seemed certain, a faded letter revealed the terrifying truth. Their enemies weren't done hunting. Now, with gunmen at their doorstep and a wounded soldier delivering warnings, Sarah must protect the family she chose if it means reopening wounds from a war she thought she'd be left behind. Because some promises don't just bind the living, they outlast the dead. Let us know where you are watching from and what time you found this video. We read every single comment and subscribe for more inspiring content. Sarah Cozed had no idea that when she opened her door that evening, she would discover a secret that had been hidden for many previous years. She was just 23 years old when she and her husband, Stuart Shank, took in 2 grandsons who were refugees from war. Their names were Deshawn and Elijah, and they provided them with love and security after the horrors that they had been through. Because of their care, the boys, who were now 10 and 8 years old, had blossomed, laughing, learning, and mending in ways that Sarah and Stuart had never imagined were possible. In every respect, save legally, they were a family for a period of 2 years. Therefore, the boys were pleased when the adoption paperwork was eventually submitted to the court. In fact, Deshawn, the elder of the 2, had begun to refer to Sarah as Mom in private conversations, which was a term that made Sarah's heart feel warm and fuzzy. Loud pounding at the door, however, destroyed everything just as their hopes and aspirations were about to begin to materialize into reality. A law enforcement officer was standing on their doorstep, and his look was indecipherable. "I need all of you to come down to the station," he said in a commanding tone. Sarah's stomach sank to the floor. Their neighbor had filed a complaint accusing them of kidnapping a youngster. Sarah and Stuart had taken all of the necessary legal steps in order to foster the boys. So the claim was completely ludicrous. Nevertheless, the system, which was mired in bureaucracy and distrust, was not paying attention. The cops at the station were icy and uncompromising in their behavior. The guys were trembling with fear. Despite the fact that his hands were shaking, Deshawn clutched to Sarah. Despite the fact that his voice was cracking, he muttered, "They can't take us away from you." But the authorities were not persuaded by the evidence. The matter was brought before the judge, who was a severe lady with eyes that could penetrate the skin, and she demanded answers. Next, the day of the hearing arrived, the moment that would determine the outcome of their situation. Sarah and Stuart were both experiencing a rapid heartbeat as they stood before the judge. There was a dispute over the boys' real pedigree, and the prosecution maintained that Sarah and Stuart did not have a legitimate claim to the property. After then, however, tiny Deshawn stood up, which was a gesture that startled everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor," he replied, maintaining his composure in spite of his anxiety, "I have something to show you." Despite the fact that his hands were trembling, he reached into his pocket and took out an old picture that he had concealed for many years. The photograph depicted a younger version of Sarah standing next to a guy dressed in military garb. The individual was, without a doubt, the biological grandpa of the boys. In his words, "This is my grandpa," Deshawn stated. "He told us before he died that if anything happened to him, we were to find her." He indicated Sarah with his finger. During his time in the military, she was his closest companion. He had faith in her to be with us. The courtroom became completely quiet. The tears began to rise up in Sarah's eyes. Because the memories of her time spent in the military were too distressing for her, she had never discussed them in public. Now, however, the truth was revealed. After seeing the photograph, the judge turned his attention to Sarah. "Is this true?" Sarah gave a little nod. "While I was away from home, their grandpa saved my life. When he was murdered, I made a commitment to him that I would look out for his sons. I just... didn't anticipate the legal process to be as challenging as it is. Yet everything shifted as a result of the discovery. All of the charges of abduction were disproved. A neighbor who had reported them, who was a former friend of Sarah's who had a grudge against her, was found to have lied. And last, the judge made a decision that was completely unexpected. It was a smile. she asserted. Family isn't always about blood, and she was right. It's about love, loyalty, and the promises we keep. She finally gave her approval for the adoption with a last stroke of her gavel. The moment Sarah gave Deshaun and Elijah a bare embrace, she realized that there are some relationships that cannot be severed, regardless of who attempts to pull them apart. Also, what about Deshaun? He had just shown that even the most little of voices might convey the most profound of truths. An outpouring of applause erupted around the courtroom as the judge completed the adoption. There was a tangible sense of relief among Sarah, Stuart, Deshaun, and Elijah as they stood together. However, while they were leaving the courtroom, Sarah realized that Deshaun was holding something else in his pocket, which was something that he had deliberately concealed from the judge. She lowered down to his level and murmured in a quiet voice, "Deshaun, what else do you have there?" After a moment of hesitation, the young man reached into his pocket and took out a little note that had been folded and placed within a fading military insignia. In a low voice, he muttered, "Grandpa gave me this before he passed away. He said to only open it when we were truly safe." Sarah's breath was taken away. Upon seeing the emblem, she realized that it was from her previous regiment. On that particular evening, the family sat together at the kitchen table and unfolded the letter in great detail. Even though it was shaky, the handwriting was deliberate. "Deshaun, if you are reading this, then you and Elijah have arrived at your destination at last. When it comes to family, Sarah Cosette is more than just a friend. There is, however, one more item that you must be aware of. In the conflict that I was a part of, boundaries were not the only issue. It concerned a secret, the kind of secret that influential individuals would do whatever to continue to keep hidden. It was in the inner of your old bag that I concealed evidence. Please locate Captain Reyes in the event that Sarah is in any danger. Do not put your faith in anybody else." Sarah's blood became ice cold. Several years ago, Captain Reyes was reported missing in action. In addition, the old backpack that the lads had been carrying had been misplaced during the pandemonium that accompanied their escape. Stuart wore a frown. What kind of secret would be worth chasing two kids over? The eyes of Deshaun became wider. The neighbor who called the police. He continued to ask us strange questions, the neighbor said. "Regarding that, Grandpa? Regarding you, Sarah?" He inquired as to whether or not we in possession of any papers from the conflict. In an instant, everything fell into place. The so-called neighbor was not only a squatter, rather he was searching for something. Now that the adoption was made public, he was aware of the precise location where they might be found. Unexpectedly, Sarah stepped up. "We are required to go." Now. However, just as she was reaching for her keys, external headlights began to flash. A black SUV came to a halt in their driveway, while it was parked there. All of a sudden, the true fight for their family was just getting started. The reflexes of a military officer kicked in for Sarah, and she acted before the others could respond. "Stuart, take the lads out to the rear of the house," she said, her voice low and anxious. "Go to the safe spot we talked about," and pointed to the location. But Sarah now. After just a brief moment of hesitation, Stuart grabbed the boy's hands and discreetly made his way into the kitchen before making his way to the garage. Then, after seeing them go, Sarah switched her attention back to the entrance. It was just in case, therefore she kept the revolver in the hall drawer. Her fingertips lightly brushed over the cool metal of the weapon, a resounding thud. There are 3 clean wraps. The cadence of the military. Sarah let out a sigh and then opened the door slightly so that she could look outside. Not the guy who was standing there was the fictitious neighbor. He was older, and he had a jagged scar that ran from his temple to his chin. It was a wound that she knew immediately. "Captain Reyes," her voice was trembling. "Sergeant Cosette." However, his grin did not extend to his eyes. "We have to have a conversation. However, you are required to accompany me. Each and every one of you." Sarah's hold on the concealed firearm became more confident. "You were declared missing in action 2 years ago. It was a race 2 years ago," he brought to my attention. "In the same way that the grandpa of your sons attempted to cover up the facts, but they are continuing to look for it. They are now aware that it is present." A floorboard made a creaking sound behind her. Sarah whirled around, and Deshaun stood still in the corridor, his eyes wide open. His disobedience resulted in his return. Instantaneously, Reyes' stance altered. "What about Deshaun? Son, take a look at me. This was a gift from your grandpa to me." A dog tag, which was the second half of the one that Deshaun wore beneath his shirt, was shown by him. The little guy let out a gasp. That's Grandpa's. From the trees on the other side of the street, a sniper fired a shot, which caused the night air to suddenly crack. After the bullet had torn through his shoulder, Reyes jerked in response. Down Deshaun was tackled by Sarah, as the windows of the SUV burst in a barrage of gunshots outside the vehicle. Despite the sound of blood rushing through her ears, she pulled him into the kitchen. It was no longer just a quest to retrieve something. Rather, it was an attempt to eradicate it. The voice of Stuart could be heard crackling from her phone, which was lying on the floor. Sarah. Shootings were heard in the midst of the firing, she cried out. Change of plans. When Reyes finally arrived behind them, he was gripping his shoulder, which was bleeding. It is expected that they would obstruct the roadways. Only one route out is possible, and that is by means of the ancient storm tunnels that are located under the area. Her thoughts were racing. Despite the fact that the tunnels were a component of their emergency escape plan, they had not attempted to utilize them since suddenly she had another epiphany. The backpack. She exhaled deeply. The one that the lads brought with them. Isn't it still in the cache that's located in the tunnel? Grimacing, Reyes gave a nod. Your grandfather wasn't just hiding you boys with Sarah for protection. He informed Deshaun of this. He was hiding the key. Sarah came to a conclusion as further bullets found their way through the front door. Then we go get it back. Continuing on from here, not only do the storm tunnels provide a means of escape, but they also conceal a secret that has the potential to bring down powerful nations. In spite of this, the guys who are chasing them have already closed all the entrances.